Today's best music.
Magic 89.9.
Okay, this is very specific. Love under lockdown, how couples can cope during COVID-19, because it's a legitimate concern. It's another headline that goes, can your relationship, new or old, survive the togetherness of a pandemic? Are you surprised to hear about articles, headlines like these, knowing that this is what happened? And it's a very unique thing for you because you guys just got married. Technically, January and February, the pandemic, even if it wasn't termed as such at that time, nagsimula na yan eh, diba? December, nagsimula na. January, may mga travel restrictions na a little bit, and then it escalated, obviously. So tell me your thoughts about those headlines. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised because Mick and I have also had topics like this on the podcast.
Right.
So we went into like a deep dive of, the problems that couples might go through while being together 24/7. Because on a regular day, each of you would go to work, you'd see each other before and after work. And I mean, even for us, we're gone like 24 hours a day for taping. Tapos magkikita kami, not even for 24 hours straight. Tapos ngayon, buwan-buwan, 24/7 magkasama kami. So there are problems.
Sorry, I'm watching Juancho's reaction. Juancho and I are super close, so it just...
Masyadong transparent yung mukha ng asawa ko. Sorry, guys.
Naghahanap na nga ako ng
We will get to you, Juancho. You will have your time. Sige, go ahead.
I found myself looking for the charger even if I'm full bat. So,
Nagpapanik na. Yes, go ahead, Meg. Yeah.
There are good things that came out of us being together 24/7, but then there were some things na we realized, okay, ganito ko pala, or ganito pala yung nagagawa natin.
Right.
While we're together 24/7. So, yeah, there are just a lot of new discoveries. Good and interesting.
Okay, we'll get to that in a bit.
Ay,
Sige.
walang bad.
Okay,
Wow.
Yeah. Hindi, yung interesting, yung relabeled yung bad into interesting. Juancho, your thoughts on that? Because it seems like you want to spit some knowledge.
no,
Okay, cheerleader mo.
I think I'll let Joyce.
Anything like this.
Yeah, I feel like our entire relationship was really fast-tracked in such a way that we weren't together for a long time before we got married. We were dating for 7 months, and then after that, we got engaged. We were only engaged for 4 months.
Right.
And before we even got married, we had a huge obstacle already because we were supposed to get married in Tagaytay, and
Correct,
then Taal
yes.
happened.
Right.
So we had to change venues, change everything within a span of 2 weeks. And then we got married right in between what happened to Taal and right before the COVID-19 pandemic really blew up here in the Philippines. And so I feel like the anxieties really began even while we were engaged. And there's a lot of anxieties even now, kasi parang even if it's honeymoon stage, it's also so much adjustment for Juancho and I, just because we're such a young couple. And then all of a sudden we have to kind of grow up and be there for each other. When you're married, you can't just think about your own worries and your own anxieties. You also have to be mindful of the other person. So even if I'm, for example, getting scared or anxious, I can't just be angry or upset the whole time because I feel that way. I also have to be considerate of how he feels as my husband. I have to take care of him at the same time, take care of myself. So it's a lot of adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we were messaging shortly after you got married, Joyce. I was congratulating you. We were messaging, and you said, it's a weird feeling. Remember? You said, it's a weird feeling. And I said, you know what? I'm only ahead of you by a year and a half. And I said that you just make rules as you go along, right? Sometimes that's just how it is. You can hear all of these things from other people, but you also kind of make your own rules as you go along. Interesting, in this article, I want to read a part which Megan touched on. And the article says, the good news is that couples now have plenty of opportunities and together time to hash out issues that they may have been avoiding. The bad news is they have so much opportunity and so much time to have to hash out things that they have probably avoided. Okay, that's the key word. Were there things that you avoided when you were in the relationship prior to getting married and now you had to tackle because you are spending 24/7 with each other locked down? Mick, let me start with you. Habang nagbubulungan pa yung Team Triviño.
Oh my! I was like, ooh, I want to hear that.
I actually thought it was something deep, but she just told me kung sino maghuhugas ng pinggan.
That's avoiding washing the dishes. Yes, go ahead, Mick.
Avoiding.
I guess before getting to that, what issues we've avoided, I just want to share, I guess, a small anecdote
Please.
about Megan and her anxiety. 'Cause
Please.
she's the more anxious person between us. So when the ECQ started, she was extremely anxious, not just mildly anxious, but actually extremely anxious. And I think I would say that, safe to say you had an anxiety attack once or
now.
twice, yeah?
Once now.
Okay.
And it was tough for her. And that, I think that would be the first, I think that might have been the first time I had really seen her get an anxiety attack out of the blue. I mean, there are other stimulus, like maybe my accident or whatever. Naturally, people would have anxiety attacks or panic a bit. But this one was out of the blue, and she was really just thinking about the situation and how it's affecting everyone, all our loved ones. So I just wanted to point that out and share that, because I feel like a lot of people went through that. Some people might feel like not sharing that, or they might feel shame for feeling that way, or they might feel scared or even more anxious. So
Or
I think it's just something that everybody feels.
Or they might think that, artista yan, celebrities, why are they going to experience any kind of anxiety? So that's good that you share that. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to share that little story with Megan, and there was really not much that I could do, to be honest. I mean, yeah, of course.
Did you feel helpless?
Say, hey, it's going to be okay, but the thing is, that doesn't do anything really. In the middle of an anxiety attack, almost anything you say is not going to be okay. It won't really affect them because they're right in the middle of the height of the emotion. Yeah. So you just stay there with them, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, if she was lying down, I remember, and I was just in bed with her, sitting down, lying down. And when things would calm down, that's the point when you can actually do something that will maybe help them or affect them. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents and my own experience with how I dealt with the anxiety attack that Megan went through.
Megan, if I may ask, sorry, what was the cause of it? What was the thought process?
It was really just COVID. It was the ECQ.
Was it uncertainty?
At the time? Yeah. It was there were a lot of scary articles on the internet about how deadly it could be, and then
this is at the beginning.
Yeah, this is at the beginning, and they were saying how it could spread, and then, very, very, very scary articles that doomsday articles yung nababasa ni Megan.
Hindi, tsaka there was a lot of stress and anxiety from my part because my mom works in a hospital in the US.
It's another thing.
I think that was the biggest thing that triggered everything, especially when the COVID statistics in the US started to go up. I got super worried about her, and mag-isa pa siya doon. So wala siyang kasama. So that was, I would say, like the main root cause of everything. It's just me worrying about my mom.
Yeah, and because in that stage, the first month, and I think I speak for everybody here when I say that we're also constantly trying to learn more about this whole virus. The first month, there's so many stories about whether it's this or that, contagious through this or that. But I mean, every day it was evolving. Every day it was changing. The information was changing. Oh, it's good to be like this, and then next day it wasn't anymore. So I can understand that. We're talking to Juancho and Joyce Triviño right here for those listening on radio, and of course Mick and Megan Daez for those who are listening through Magic 89.9, and for our viewers on Facebook, hello, thank you. Joyce and Juancho, was there any anxiety attacks? Who was the more anxious person? Who was the more calm person? Probably the calm. I won't ask anymore. Your husband's checking whether his phone is charged when it's fully charged because he's panicking about the question. So, but in all seriousness, was there any point? Because you're a new couple. You pointed it out. Not just newly married, but you're technically a new couple. So you're learning things about each other.
Yeah, I think it's me that had a lot of panic attacks and anxiety when the pandemic started. And it was really more of, it was a huge lifestyle change for me. Everybody I think knows that I travel a lot for work. And even the both of us, we would always travel. In the morning show that we
Oh,
host
yes.
together, we don't stay in the city. So we'd always be like, when in one morning we're in Bulacan, the next morning we're in Batangas. We'd always be traveling, and so it was just such a huge change for me to be staying at home and not being able to do the usual things that I would do. I was also so used to training and going outdoors,
Right.
doing sport, and that felt like such a huge chip on my shoulder not being able to do those things. But yeah, I had a lot of panic attacks, and Juancho and I had a lot of fights that came from that, only because I wasn't able to express to him that the reason why I was acting a certain way was because I was anxious about the whole situation. So parang he would get a certain action that I do, and then he would take it as I'm fighting him instead of I'm trying to battle something inside of me and I don't know how to express it. And I talked about this on the podcast already, and I did mention that I started seeing my therapist. And I feel like, as Mikael mentioned earlier, a lot of people find shame in that. They feel scared to not to approach anybody to ask for a professional help because people will call you crazy. There's a stigma that follows that. But for me personally, because I was having a lot of panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and my depression came back, I had to do something that could help our marriage be better, because what I was going through was affecting us already, and I couldn't I think the one thing that we realized now that we're married, you can't ever expect the other person to fix you. That's the common misconception when you get married, right? That
Or to complete you.
that you need this other person to feel better about yourself, or you need this other person to fix you. And I feel like that's just such a huge pressure to place on somebody. Of course, they're there to take care of you, to love you, to nurture you, to be there for you, as Mick mentioned. But at the end of the day, these are battles that you have to face on your own and figure it out, so that when you go into your relationship and in your marriage, you can also be there for your partner. And for me, going into my church group, reading books, writing, creating the podcast, and
That like what? Like, give us a couple of things that you discovered about during this, especially during this pandemic.
No, it's interesting because now that we don't have taping, we don't know when taping for us is going to resume. Of course, we need to still find ways on how to earn to make a living. So what Mick and I have been doing is we've created an office setting in our house, and we've set office hours for ourselves. But to actually get to that process of actually getting those hours and getting an office, it was kind of a struggle for me because I'm not used to, doing things at a controlled pace, because taping, they go on for hours and sometimes you don't even know what's happening. But doing like a sort of 9 to 5 was
Yeah.
very new for me, and I didn't have the tempo in it. Like, wala yung rhythm ko nun eh. So those
Or the discipline.
Let's
be honest.
Yes.
Let's
I'm a
be honest.
procrastinator.
Let's be honest.
And those would bring up very interesting conversations that Mick and I would have very often, almost every day. And it even came to the point now one day, everything that I did was just not in tempo and not in order. It was like wrong. Everything that I was doing was, not right. And it was a very frustrating day for me, let's be honest. So I mean, these are things that we didn't think that we would have to go through. Kasi nasa taping kami, we have our own space and our own time to ourselves. But wow, I didn't think that these were topics that we would actually have to like tackle on every single day.
Yeah, no, just to add to that story and just give a bit, maybe an anecdote or two.
Go ahead.
I guess Megan and I, we fell into a hole where we were trying to figure out what we can do to survive, as you were saying a while ago. And the work that we had to do is not something that Megan was used to. I was a bit more used to it because I was naturally a bit more into business. But for Megan, who got into showbiz at such a young age, she was never really exposed to those kinds of office settings where you have to do administrative work and you really have to keep yourself in check when it comes to the time. If not, things will pile on. So,
and I think it's also because you're more of a natural leader and I'm more naturally a follower.
Yeah.
So I think when it came to the point that I had to be a leader, like we both had to lead in this, it was a struggle for me because I didn't have that initiative to like do things right away. I would always wait for him like to tell me, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that. But Mikael was like, I can't always tell you what to do. You need to know what you need to do para maging team tayo. Hindi pwedeng siya lang or hindi pwedeng ako lang. Kailangan dalawa kami na mag-work dito to make it work.
And might I add, I said that in the sweetest way possible. And in the opposite way of sweet.
Well, it's sometimes not about the message, but how you deliver the message. You know, that's sometimes key in everything. Joyce, who is better in handling crisis? In your opinion, in your early stages of your relationship and now the marriage, a few months, February. What are we talking about here in terms of handling crisis? Whether it's a pandemic or anything else?
Yeah, I think I'm a little better just in that I'm a bit more robotic than Juancho. Between the two, it's true. Look at him laughing. It's true because I'm not very emotional. And in parts, you know this.
What?
I'm not very emotional.
You have changed. You have changed.
Meron ako story behind it. Okay, so...
Sige, go. Floor is yours.
So when it comes to like business and things that need to be done, I'm very robotic in that I feel something, but I tend to shut it off. Maybe that's why I have a lot of issues because it boils up and it tensed up and then it becomes a huge problem. But I handle crisis in a way that I don't really think about how I feel at the moment. I think about the solution that needs to be done so I can get out of the crisis. Whereas Wanch is a bit more compassionate and sensitive in a way that he actually feels a lot for everything that's happening. So it affects him on a more personal level. What was your anecdotal kwento?
Nanggigigil
so how do I say this? A lot of the interesting days we've had here in Casa Triviño came out of my being emotional. And I'll tell you why that is happening. I am for about 9 years already, I've been acting and 90 plus days na ako hindi umaarte. So lumalabas na lang yung emotions ko here at home. And I tend to just be overly emotional about a lot of things. I can safely say that it could have avoided a lot of interesting days, but well, that's who I am. And a lot of we've been tested, yeah. We've been tested, and a lot of things were built because of and agreed upon based on the interesting days that we've had. So I wouldn't take that for granted also.
Thanks for the interesting term.
All right. Yeah. It's being thrown around, huh?
I would like some synonyms to
I know. It's been thrown around as a replacement word. It's been thrown around. Okay. Who is better at apologizing between the two of you? Pandemic or no pandemic? I'll start with Mick and Megan here. Who's better at apologizing? It's a very important trait. The reason why I'm asking this.
Oh wait, we'll answer in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Okay, so you say it's me or you.
No, you point na lang.
Point? Oh, okay. So 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
Runaway winner si Mikael.
Yeah, dude, if you pointed at yourself, wala na. Sarado na
okay.
To. We make this day interesting right now.
When ako pa may kagagawan, ano? When you say Mick runaway winner, it's either because he's just better at it or he has to multiple times say I'm sorry every now and then. Medyo hindi ko. Tell me, Mick, why are you the runaway winner here? I bring this up because apologizing is a very important thing in a relationship that gets taken for granted. I would like to think, correct me if I'm wrong, for some people it's hard to apologize. For some people it's easy, but it's not sincere. There's always that I'm sorry, but yung may kailangan may but, right? So you're actually, you're apologizing, but you're pointing out something else that you want to be right, and we've all been guilty with that trait. So Mick, explain yourself.
I guess we pointed at me because I'm very direct with my apologies, and I don't like it when problems linger. So the only time that I would delay it is kung medyo mataas yung emosyon. So you just let that subside. But to be honest with you, after like an hour or two, you kind of like chill already. The adrenaline is gone. And for me, I just once adrenaline has gone down, I just go up and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. Let's be better." And that's really it. I also agree with what you said about "I'm sorry, but," because we don't. Well, I don't agree with that. I think Megan doesn't agree with that either, because
You have to own up to it.
yeah, you own up to it, and there's really no point in saying that but, because that but only addresses what happened in the past, and we're never changing that. So you just say, "I'm sorry, we'll be better," and as long as that is said, I think we're okay. But the problem here is that even just that, Megan usually procrastinates when it comes to saying that.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, so you want this to drag on? You want this interesting day to become 2 interesting
So
days?
wait, does that
Or 3 interesting days or what?
okay? Does that mean, Megan, that you can sleep through something like an argument and then, postpone it for the next day? Is that something that you can do? No, I ask that because some people can't do that. This is an actual, that's a skill. Right? You can sleep through it, and I'm not accusing anyone, by the way. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you there. I want to make this kwento.
Okay. Meron
You
din,
can do
nanggigigil
it.
din yung other couple eh. Sige, go ahead, Mick. Go ahead.
There's a technique, and
Okay.
I've caught her doing this technique. Okay? When she's gonna make the interesting day drag on to another day, what she does is she cries herself to sleep.
Oh.
And I was like, the first time I saw it, I was ready already to just like put this in the past.
Hey, remember, she's an
in-
actress. Let me warn you.
When I went in, umiiyak siya, and her back was against the wall on the bed, sobbing and everything. But the thing is, it looked like a scene from a teleserye.
See what I mean?
So, and when I saw it, I was reminded of that, and sobrang natawa ako. I was like, oh my God, bakit ginagawa?
Hindi ka naawa, natawa ka.
I think if I had my camera, I would have taken it out and given her a snapshot first and taken a photo lang. But it was just so funny, and then I gave her a hug, and I was laughing while giving her a hug, and I was like,
How
hey,
manipulative of you,
Yeah,
partner.
cool.
Hey, ginagawa ko lang yun kasi like when I feel stressed, like when we have interesting days, kailangan ko lang talaga ilabas.
Okay.
And then, I talk to you. Kasi feeling ko kapag hindi, I'm just gonna be sobbing and ugly crying in front of Mikael, which I don't want to happen. Kasi
Okay.
alam ko walang mangyayari. I know that the problem isn't going to be fixed.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I do have a problem with saying sorry. It's hard for me kasi parang feeling ko, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make the fight even bigger. But knowing Mikael and his personality, he likes talking about things right away. He doesn't like the problem to linger. But yun nga, that's a constant struggle that I have to go through is
Right.
getting the words out of my mouth. Kasi minsan ayaw talaga lumabas. Like I don't know how that happens. It's just, sorry, I love you so much.
And it's more interesting. I'll get to the Triviños in a bit. We're talking to Mikael Daez and Megan Young and Juancho Triviño and Joyce Spring for those listening on radio. This is very interesting also, Joyce and Juancho, because with the pandemic, there is no choice. You are around each other. You know what I mean? Now, there are therapists who would say, hey, there has to be a time in the day where you really physically separate. If si Joyce muna ay nasa west wing ng bahay, yung si Juancho muna nasa east wing ng bahay. There has to be some separation regardless of whether you're arguing or not. That's what they say, because there just has to be that alone time, because we are taken out of our routine of, okay, when we want to kind of get away from our spouses, our partners or whatever, go shopping, go to the mall, go to the gym, maybe take a run, walk the dog or whatever. It's your time. But that component is taken out. You have to deal with these things. So I go back to you, Juancho and Joyce, who is better at doing that and who can sleep through an argument? Because there are a couple. I personally, if I may add, I personally cannot. So I cannot. Yeah, I have to, at the end of the day, regardless of whether we're separated or not, have to resolve the issue. What say you, Triviños?
Let's do the pointing thing too.
Let's say the name. Who's better at apologizing? In 3, 2, 1.
Juancho.
Mm-hmm. The guys, look at that,
Did
stepping up.
It's
Stepping
also
up to the
runaway
game.
decision.
Sobra.
Go ahead. Okay, you seem to have a story, Juancho. Tell us, please.
I'm back na yung girls, ha? This is a competition. Boys will win.
Joyce has a story.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, okay, so Wancho and I are very different in that whenever there's a problem, I'm the type of person that doesn't want to deal with it at the moment. Kind of like with Megan, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I need space. I can't deal with the problem instantaneously. And Wancho is the type of person that could have a monologue about all the issues that we need to resolve for 30 minutes straight without getting a word in. And he would
Without stopping.
without stopping, nothing. Siguro he would just stop for for crying in between. But apart from that, he just keeps on going. And my problem is I'm always just like, okay, are you done? That's my problem. So, but we're trying to be better at it. And the way that we're doing that is I'm learning to say sorry these days. And I'm trying to beat him to it. So whenever we have an argument, I always tell him, okay, let's separate muna. You go, you do, and be in the west part of the condo. I'll be here.
The West Wing.
So West Wing ka muna, dito muna ako sa lobby. And I would tell him to give me a little bit of time, mga 30 minutes to an hour lang before we come back and resolve things. And now I'm trying to beat him to it. I try to say sorry before he even does, even though somebody's winning the argument. It doesn't really matter to us anymore as long as we try to resolve it. But yeah, ang daming beses na in the beginning of the quarantine, we'd have a lot of huge fights. And
Really?
I'm
Interesting.
the type of person, yeah. So I'm the
Were
type of
were
person-
there recordings of this fight that we can release on the internet?
Yeah, save for blackmailing in the future. But yeah, I would always be the type of person that could sleep through any fights. So I'd be able to sleep already, and Wancho can't take it. So he would wake me up in the middle of the night, like 1 or 3
I get you,
a.m.
buddy. I get you. Yeah.
And he's just like, sorry, I really tried to sleep this off. I went to the sala, I tried to sleep, I couldn't sleep. I just really need to talk to you. So we talk things through, and then we go to sleep. So, right?
Yeah, it's different now. Just like what she said, na she's trying to say sorry na kaagad. So the other interesting time that we've had this week, I was knocking on the door and I was gonna say na parang, alam mo Joyce, tapos nag-sorry siya, tapos parang
Supalpal.
I was caught off guard, and I had this whole speech prepared and everything, and it just went to waste. And I forgave her. And yeah, it's hard for me to sleep it off if there's something that's bothering me, and it wasn't resolved. But in my perspective, naman, that's why the reason why I say sorry kaagad is me knowing that it's not a competition. If I made you feel a certain way, I'm sorry that you felt that. We can't be, out here trying to discuss for an hour on what we fought about and how that made you feel. But we went straight to the root of the problem and just, magsorry lang tayo sa mga bagay na
Figure it out.
naramdaman natin sa isa't isa. And that works out well naman for the both of us.
Something that Wansha always tells me that I always try to remember, even if I'm at the height of my emotion, is he always says, you have to remember that we're batting for the same team. We're not fighting against each other. Sometimes it might feel that way because, we're going through this issue, but even though we've hurt each other, we have to always remember that we're on the same team. We're on the same boat. If you aren't willing to participate and change things and adjust to each other, tayo parehas yung talo. So that really helps me change my perspective, even when I have high emotions.
Well, you did say, Juancho, that this is not a battle, although Mick did say that the husbands are ahead in this particular battle. So I don't know who to believe. But piece of advice for both of you. you guys are never gonna win. So no, yeah, take it from me. No, just go ahead and apologize. We laugh about these things, but this is serious because when you, again, going back to a lot of the articles that are out there, especially during the pandemic, like divorce filings are up. Depression, obviously, amongst couples are up. The higher rate of conflict is up because of the confined feeling. Domestic violence. These are numbers. These are actual numbers. Huh? Domestic violence numbers all over the world are up. I mean, just imagine couples who were just about to separate, and then the pandemic hits, and then they're all of a sudden forced to deal with each other. So you can imagine all of these. So that's why I wanted to ask these things, because as much as we laugh about it and we talk about anecdotes and all this is serious for a lot of couples, regardless of whether they're newlyweds. Maybe even worse for people who are, have been married for quite a while. That's the reason why I wanted to dig in and asking questions about your coping mechanisms, because there are some issues. Has having a podcast, a channel, helped you? And this is very interesting. I wanted to ask both of you this. Mick, when we were talking on the phone a couple of weeks ago for this episode, we talked about, hey, the similarity that you and I had a kind of like a private wedding, a secret wedding, in the sense that there was no big brouhaha about it, and we kept it that way. Me and my wife, we love attending the big weddings. We love it. But it wasn't our thing. So we kept it private. We made the announcement on the day that we got married. You guys would protect your privacy too. I would like to thank Juancho and Joyce, because you're such celebrities, big celebrities. So you have to protect your privacy. But you also have the podcast. You also have a channel. And in the channel and in the podcast, you share a lot about yourselves. So how do you reconcile that you want to keep a lot of the stuff private, but you also are sharing so much about yourselves, and in the same process, there is a negative part about that also. Sharing yourselves to the world opens you up to, the usual criticisms and hatred and bashing and all of that. So how do you reconcile that, wanting to keep your marriage affairs private, but also having a channel, a podcast, and sharing a lot of intimate details and about your marriage? Go ahead, please.
Me? Okay. What's this called? I guess I never thought about having to reconcile those two.
Mm-hmm.
Like having the wedding private. Like, I think they're two independent events that don't necessarily intersect. At least for us, the way we made the decision, at the very least. For the wedding, I guess it just so happened that we wouldn't post publicly about it, but it was never really a secret.
It was an open secret amongst the people that we truly love.
Your circle, correct?
Yeah. Our circle, it was completely open. We would
Right.
discuss things. So, but the thing is, we don't really hang out with friends outside of the circle. We're very tight knit. It's work and our tight knit, close circle of friends and family. So during the times that we're not at work, we're actually constantly talking about it on our group chats and everything. So it didn't really feel, at least for me, it didn't really feel like much of a secret. But it just wasn't public because we weren't showing it on social media at that point. And for the podcast, I actually really enjoy sharing experiences on the podcast because, for one, it challenges Megan and I, to think about stories. And when we tell them, we surprise ourselves that, oh my God, I completely forgot about that story and that experience.
Yeah, every week that we do the podcast, there's always something new that we learn about each other, even though we've been together for almost 10 years. I mean, there's still some things that we discover about each other when we do the podcast. And I like it because it's kind of a way for us to, tackle some things that maybe we haven't discussed before. Maybe these are things na, okay, hindi pala natin napag-usapan. Why don't we talk about it now on the podcast? Which we don't mind because in a way, the podcast is kind of like us talking to our friends. The viewers of the podcast have become some sort of family in a way. So we try to treat it very friend like. Parang ganito, kwentuhan lang.
Yeah, just to add to that, what's this called? The reason also why we came up with that setup, like the podcast, we pick an issue and we literally just tell stories that we have about that issue rather than say, do this, do that. So we just allow the audience to pick whatever they want out of those stories that they hear from us. Because for me, my mode of learning ever since I was young was to watch other people and watch their experiences and pick out and try out some of those things that I see. And if it works for me, I keep it. But at least we don't come off as someone saying, hey, we're experts in this, because we aren't.
You're not preachy, in other words.
Yeah. We're just taking you guys behind the scenes and sharing these experiences. Because when people can relate to experiences, it kind of makes your own experiences easier to deal with. So let's say there's a shameful experience of jealousy and you felt it. To know that someone else felt that way, at least for me, makes it easier for me to deal with. I was like, oh, I'm not alone. So I think that's one of the points we wanted to share when we did the podcast and when we tell our stories on it.
All right. So no regrets. There are no negative sides to it so far.
I think there are, and I think there will be more. But there are two sides to a coin.
Always,
and I think that negativity will always be there because not everybody will agree with your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody will agree with the story. But nonetheless, it is a story that has happened to us, and us sharing it doesn't change what happened anymore. But I think it's part of the discussion and it's part of the value that the podcast and our stories bring to the conversation. That, hey, there's a dark side and there's a light side. Neither is wrong or correct. It's just what will work for you when you take it away for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Joyce and Juancho, did it serve as a coping mechanism also? The decision to put yourself out there, especially you, Joyce, with your projects, your podcasts and all that. Is it therapeutic to a certain degree for you as a couple or for you individually to put your life out there to a certain extent?
Actually, what I noticed with Juancho and I, we were very public in the beginning of the relationship.
Okay.
And then the deeper we got into the relationship, the more private we became. Like, people were also surprised that we got married. We didn't have any announcement. We announced our engagement after a couple of months that we were already engaged. And I feel like that was it really was a subconscious thing for us, because when we were dating in the beginning, like when we were hosting the morning show together, we weren't dating yet. And then it became like a TV thing. And then eventually became a real thing in our lives. And we just felt like there were a lot of things that we didn't want to bring to the public that we were doing. And so we kind of went backwards with that. We were very public in the beginning, and now nga in the vlog, sobrang minsan lang din kami mag-update with our YouTube channel of our lives. Like and it's usually
Why is
simple
that?
things.
Why is that, Joyce? Why did it kumbaga bakit hindi na kasing dalas? I want to see the reason. Is it just purely schedules? You're busy, or did you discover that the more that you get into your marriage, to the thick of it, the more that you wanted to protect it?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. You're right. The deeper we got into our marriage and our relationship, the more sensitive we were with outside forces, and so we wanted to protect it. Everything that we are going through, even before we got married. So we went into premarital counseling.
Yeah.
We went through a lot of things that we never talked about in public until after our wedding, because we really both wanted to protect it, and it felt like we were getting to know each other at such a fast pace, and so we didn't want the other outside forces
to compromise it.
Yeah, to compromise.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to therapeutic to an extent. But now that I'm thinking about it, I would like to focus on why we are, me and Joyce, Joyce and I, why we are uploading these podcasts, these vlogs, and our goal naman deep inside, and we've talked about it, is our story can help other people, just like what Mikael said. And if our testimonies, in our in our own little way, di ba, parang reduces the interesting days that other couples may fight about, or just the simple things like you can actually cut your husband's hair just by watching on YouTube. That's why we are actually it's okay for us to be sharing these kinds of details and the intimate parts of our lives, like what we talk about also in the vlogs. And I think there's also a fine line naman to what we can upload and what we are
Willing to
not
share.
allowed. Yeah, willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things naman that we talk about before, going on a podcast or taping for a vlog and going on interview. So I think that works out well for the both of us.
And if I may add, like with Mick and Megan, I like how they said now when they do the podcast, they learn a lot about each other, even after 10 years of being together. And with me and Juancho, we do that in an entirely different way. And I'm sure a lot of couples have that also. Like, we started playing badminton together, started arranging Zoom calls with our ninongs and our ninangs when we want to fix some issues or talk about certain things. We started doing fun things together, like playing sports when it was allowed na, or riding our bikes.
Kala ko may badminton court kayo sa east wing ng bahay nyo, Joyce.
Sa hacienda namin dito. Yeah, pero yung gano'n, nakakahanap kami. I think with any relationship, if you're listening to the radio right now and to this broadcast, with any relationship, you just have to find your own little sanctuary of how you can reconnect, connect, and understand each other better. For some couples like Mick and Megan, it's podcasting and sharing and creating these content and also streaming, diba, gaming. For Juancho and myself, it's the late nights that we spend after having a glass of wine where we're just lying down and talking about how our day went.
Or tequila.
Or tequila, depending on the mood. Or seeing
Or depending on
friends
the
and playing.
topic. Some topics call for tequila, some call for wine.
That's right.
The more interesting the topic is,
More
as you would say, yes.
How you want the night to end.
Yes.
Is,
How to
you
bounce
think
back.
Right. Okay. Well, for those listening on the radio, again, we're talking to Juancho Triviño and Joyce Spring, newlyweds, February, while Megan Young and Mikael Daez, January, correct? Am I correct? Yeah, the start of the year. Now, okay. I want to be real here and ask you this. Couples, obviously, we talked about protecting your relationship. You are in a different scenario as normal couples, in the sense that you both are all of you four in the limelight. And there is a certain pressure, regardless of whether we acknowledge it, admit it or not, that sometimes, especially if you are playing it out to the public, that there is that pressure of you have to somehow, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just me playing devil's advocate, maintain a certain level of or a certain image, and to some couples this has been their detriment. They try to play it on social media, and talking about internationally even, that this is how they are, this is the lifestyle, sweet and chummy. The next thing you know, they're divorced. And obviously that's not what we wish for anyone. But there is that pressure of trying to maintain, especially if you're doing a podcast, especially if you have a channel, especially if you host something together. There's always that, we need to, keep this going. And I'm sure a lot of these couples, celebrity couples all over the world, have had that conversation and probably have extended their relationships because it's a business or because it's an image. It's the real thing. That's what happens all over the world, right? What's your take on that? Let me start with you, Mick and Megan, on that, the psychology behind that. Do we have to always look good for everyone? Do we have to always get along for everyone once the cameras start rolling?
What say you?
What say you? I think that's one of the reasons why Mick and I came up with the podcast, because it's called Behind Relationship Goals. People always say na, kayo relationship goals kayo, or how do you become like a lasting couple. But in reality, I mean, couples always fight. And Mick and I go through these fights. Na may mga arguments din kami, and we don't always get along. And that's why we came up with the podcast, Behind Relationship Goals, the reality behind the goals that you see online. And this is why we're able to be so honest with our audience and why we're able to share real stories that we go through is because we want people to realize na, hey, we're going through the same wave, we're going through the same path. We may come from different kinds of lifestyles, but in any relationship, you guys will always have ups and downs. And we try to be as honest as possible when it comes to these problems. But like you mentioned, may mga couples talaga na maybe abroad, maybe even here, who try to put on a facade na, okay, we have to be together.
We got to keep it going. We got to keep it going. Right. Yeah.
But you know, when Mick and I have like a really rough day, and let's say we have to shoot the podcast, we'll say na, okay, we're not going to put up a face for this because we're not going to be able to be real with each other. So we need to discuss whatever we're going through and really get to the bottom of it before we do any podcast or any kind of content. Kasi we're not going to be able to do our jobs or we're not going to be able to be real with each other. Ayaw namin na plastic yung mangyayari dun sa ilalabas namin.
Right.
And, you know, with me being very transparent and Mikael being very honest about his feelings, that's just not in our personalities to try to fake it till you make it because it doesn't work for us.
And that's interesting because you're a 10-year relationship. You've hit a decade already in a relationship. It's very different perspective, I would like to think, Joyce and Juancho, because new relationship, got engaged, got married. So I want to hear your take on that. Do you feel the need to keep it going, to keep that facade? Is there a psychology behind it? Is there a pressure behind it?
I remember I was watching this TED Talk before. I just wanted to kind of put it in here. And it said how to be a better conversationalist. And she said, now, you know, usually people tell you to do these body cues of nodding your head and smiling so that the person knows that you're listening to them, right? But she said, forget about that. If you're
Kaya lang si Juancho sa banyo daw. Doon siya.
Habang nakabukas yung
Yeah. I think the key word there, and Joyce mentioned it, is, you know, if you are able to stay authentic throughout, you know, whatever you do for your channel, for the podcast and all that, well and good. As long as you're not doing it for other people, I guess, you know. If the pressure of doing it for other people is greater than, you know, because it's what's natural to both of you, then I think that's where it becomes a little bit of a problem. We're talking to Mikael Daez, Megan Young, Joyce Pring, Juancho Triviño. We have already taken much of their time. We started a little bit late, so we're about to wrap up. 3 quick questions, just quick. Who's needier? No more justification, huh? Who's needier among the two?
Here.
Okay, Mick?
Who's near?
Needier.
Countdown ba or
In a good way. I'm not talking about it in a bad way. Who's needier? Juancho on Team Triviño. No, nothing? 50-50.
They're not.
umamin ka
Mikaels,
na.
Actually stump these couples? I can't believe that.
No.
Honestly, it's not even deep. The only compromise
Go ahead, yeah.
that I've had to do for Mikael is the one time that I didn't have my nails done because he just does not like nail art. He likes natural nails. He doesn't like me wearing lipstick, but I love it. So there was this one time that I said, okay, fine. I'm going to compromise. I'm not going to have my nail art. But it's like that simple.
It's only because
I
it's only because he doesn't want you to compete with him with his nail art and his that's all. It's a showbiz. It's a showbiz thing, Megan. It's a showbiz thing. Joyce, do you have an answer for this? Biggest sacrifice, biggest compromise. Juancho, go. Before we
I
end.
think the biggest for me is a huge character change. It's learning how to humble myself and not have this gnawing need to always be right and always be
It's
false.
a good one.
Yeah, and I think it's because, you know, ever since I was a kid, I was 17, I've always been very independent. I've always lived on my own. I've taken care of myself. I've always done things my way. I travel alone. I do everything on my own. And then all of a sudden I'm married to someone and I need to compromise and learn how to say sorry and adjust to his preferences and not always be right and put my pride down. And it's been a lot of adjustment, and it's something that we're still constantly working on, but it's, I think, the biggest sacrifice that I had to make in my life ever for anybody. So
Well, ako naman, I can't grow a mustache anymore or a beard for the reason of, and it's
Pero
not
pwede daw nail art.
nail art pwede.
Go ahead, Juancho. Sorry, go ahead.
It's not because Joyce wants me to shave it off, but it actually irritates her skin
yeah.
if I have stubble.
There's
So
a physical
I think
manifestation. That's what you're saying.
on top of mine,
Right,
that's what I came up with.
And the thing is, Juancho's beard doesn't really grow.
Hilaw.
Oh,
Yeah.
Patchy,
Yes,
patchy.
it's patchy. So yeah, that's ours. How about you, Daez?
Ikaw, Mikael.
Meron ba?
Oh,
Meron?
was it? No, that was mine. That was really mine.
Yeah, that was his answer.
That was really mine. I was serious about that.
Yeah, that was his answer.
I don't. I don't.
I don't
I
think
can't
Mick
think
and
of any.
yeah.
I really cannot think of any. I'm not. I don't think in that way. I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, I don't think like we
And-
had to like really compromise anything.
Yeah,
for
and
each other.
probably if I asked this question in your first year, you probably would have a different answer. You are already on your 10th year, and there are obviously differences after a decade. You know, that you don't, as Mikael said, you don't think of it that way. It's not even labeled as a compromise anymore. It's just something that you do.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a. Thank you for answering for me, Boom.
The
Love it.
Got it, Boo.
I'm just ahead a year and a half for you guys. Judges say 10, by the way, with the answer. Guys, this has been fun. Cheers muna. Coffee and your wine, if there's still. Thank you.
We
Thank you.
finished it already, Boom. But cheers to you. Cheers to you, Daez.
Cheers.
It's good to see both of you, or all four of you. And
Punuin mo, Boom. Shot ka. Puno. Wala. Joke lang. Wag.
Gagawin niya yan.
yeah, you know it. We hope to do this in person sometime. The important thing is you guys stay healthy, stay happy, and hopefully we'll have this conversation again. Juancho, it's great to meet you, and good luck with everything, the podcasts, the channel, and hopefully everything will be over soon, and we can all hang out in person again, masks or without masks. It doesn't matter as long as we can all see each other again.
Thanks, Bart.
Miss you,
This
Mick.
was so fun.
You want you?
This was great. Oh, there you go. There's an appearance. Awesome. There you go. That's this has been fun. This has been great. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, for those listening on radio, we'd like to thank Mikael Daez and Megan Young and Juancho Triviño and Joyce Pring for spending and entering the chat room. My name is Boom Gonzalez. We are all out. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next week again. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.